Hello, flat earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. We're told that this object falling to the ground is because of gravity, and I'd like to try and explain how that is a complete fallacy, an imaginary concept used to explain how we don't fly off a spinning ball, and how this whole being locked into the idea of gravity being everywhere and being the creator of our ball Earth and the heliocentric model is really a fallacy, and thinking about it and breaking away from the concept, or at least detaching from the idea that gravity is necessary to keep us stuck to the Earth or make things fall to the Earth rather than just layers of density, is preventing us from considering the concept of free energy. How? Well, let's just say this is 1 kilogram, and it's said to have a force of 1 kilogram of force, which is 10 newtons of force. So all of a sudden this 1 kilogram object becomes 10 newtons, and it's apparently exerting a force just to be resting on this table. But it's just 1 kilogram. Whatever mass it has, in whatever volume or density it is, makes its weight. You don't need to talk about its mass, and you don't need to talk about its mass being pulled or pushed towards the Earth by some force, some external force, apart from the object's own weight. So, Newton and Galileo got their heads together and talked about force and motion, and how, of course, if something is in motion, then it is subject to resistance, whether that's air resistance, friction, whatever, something pushing back on it, an opposing force. Fine. But we're talking about moving objects, something that has had energy in the form of force applied to it to make it move. So of course it's assumed, after first conceiving the heliocentric model of balls going around the sun, we had to have the ball Earth then spinning to create day and night. And then with this idea that we're spinning, we have to have a way that we stick on the Earth despite our weight. Of course, on a flat, level plane that's not going anywhere, that's maybe infinite, then it's layers of density. You don't need a reason other than weight to stop yourself flying off because of centrifugal force of any spin. So, moving objects that have some mass will basically create more damage the more force that's put into them. A train smashing into a wall, a bullet smashing into a wall. They have had force exerted on them to give them their potential and kinetic energy. So, what's giving this can of mackerel its potential energy right there on the floor, on the desktop. Some energy, external energy, needs to be applied to either lift this can or pull the table away so the can can drop to the floor. Energy is required, often in the form of a force, to lift an object, to give it that potential energy that it will have when it's dropped. Hence the sound and possibly a dent in the table or the can if the towel wasn't there. Extra force has been applied by lifting it up into the air. But once it has done its job and hit the floor or settled in a state of rest, there is no more force happening on the can. It is just weighing what the can weighs on this earth, with nothing to do with the size or the mass of the earth that we're on. We don't know what the earth is made of. We've never drilled down there, so how can we say how massive the earth is in order for this to weigh 1 kilogram? And if the earth was more massive all of a sudden, does this get pulled to the earth more and weigh more? And likewise on a smaller earth, spinning ball earth, would this weigh less because the earth has less mass? That's the whole point of the moon landings, to have people jumping around in what appears to be low gravity in order to prove once and for all that Newton was correct about the mass of the planet being responsible for the force of the gravity. So understanding that the moon landings were very much about maintaining the science that had already been well established and the heroes that have been hailed as scientific great minds throughout history, who we really know nothing about, only what we read in the history books. Aristophanes, this mysterious character who lived about 2,000 years ago, like Jesus, is responsible for the size, circumference of the ball Earth, just because he measured some shadows and could have measured them on a flat surface and got the same results with a close, low sun. It's very easy to understand how the math can be manipulated. The beautiful thing about math is that you can plug in different variables and get different results. That's the whole thing about math, isn't it? It's not ever one number fits all. You can always plug in different variables to get different predictable results. So if you want to have things weighing 1 kilogram to be called the same thing but in terms of a force, then you add a 0 to the 1 and you've got 10 newtons. 1 kilogram is 10 newtons. Well, they say 9.98 newtons. So they shave off a fraction that cannot really be measured. Can you measure that much of a difference in the weight of this? The fraction remaining, the 0.02 newtons remaining, when you consider that 1 kilogram is 10 newtons, or 9.98 newtons. No, it's immeasurable. Newton did that with the coinage, when he was, the British coinage, when he was the head of the mint, the Royal Mint. Well, that's a job he also did. And he was responsible for reshaping, standardizing the British currency, alchemy with different metals for different weights and values, but still giving you the same thing, a coin of a certain value. So, free energy and thinking about free energy and the fact that science has been misled down this dark path simply by taking the idea of motion and force a step too far and saying that once something is at rest, then there is still a force acting on it. There isn't. You apply a force or you lift this into the air somehow with some kind of energy to give it its potential energy. You can lift it with mechanics, you can lift it with machinery, your arms, you can lift it with water, you can lift it with frequencies, sound, vibrations, magnetism. Yeah. We are given the impression that our brains, our minds are locked in to this idea that everything's in motion by its own accord. But it's all relative. And this can is exerting a force on the table, and the table is pushing back. They're just denser materials separating each other. Just like you can't put your hand through the table. It's just too dense. Unless you apply enough force to penetrate that density, or that mass, if you like. Drop this in water, and you're dropping it in a different medium, and it's going to fall at a different rate. So people talk about the rate of acceleration, or the rate of how things of a different mass can fall at the same speed or the same rate of acceleration, as being proof of gravity. Okay, things are passing through a medium. You drop something in the air. Okay, aerodynamics are going to have an effect on that object. But if we drop two balls, they'll accelerate to the ground at a certain speed. Fine. That doesn't mean that they accelerate at a certain speed because the Earth has a certain mass and is of a certain size and is spinning around to make day and night and spinning around the sun. It doesn't mean that. It is proof or evidence that heavy or dense things try to reach their own density or fall through a medium that's less dense than it. Put it through air, it drops pretty quickly. Put it through water, and it drops more slowly. Put it through treacle, and it would ooze down. Just going through layers of density. If the treacle was deep enough, it might just end up suspended at a certain point where it was as dense as the treacle, creating the weight and more density around it. Maybe that, and that's how fish do their thing. They're not affected by gravity. You can't weigh a fish in water or a whale. When they die, they float. They don't sink. They're not subject to gravity. They have swim bladders, which makes them more dense or less dense, depending on their particular volume, the space they're taking up. So they fill up their swim bladders and up they go. Yeah. Make themselves take up more space, so they become less dense. They rise. They shrink their bladders, they become more compact, so they take out the volume that they're taking up is changed. Down they go. Nothing to do with gravity. So we just keep forgetting that we're in a medium, we're in a particular medium called air. And even when you create a vacuum by taking the air out, what's replaced it? Not water, not another medium. You've just created suction. As soon as you let that thing go, everything reaches an equilibrium again. You didn't necessarily take anything out when you created a vacuum. Gravity is a fallacy. Free energy is in the understanding that objects, when they have been dropped on the floor, they are at rest. That's it. Their job has been done until they are lifted up again, and they have that potential energy. How you lift them up is the way you can get free energy by putting in a low amount of energy, for example, a frequency, to lift this can. How much energy do you need to use to lift the can and keep it there, suspended in the air with sonic frequencies? Compared to the energy required to hold it there with your own hands. Or just have it rise up and go down, rise up and go down, rise up and go down. You've got your potential energy, you've got your kinetic energy ready to go places. So yeah, this is why flat Earth is important. This is why, no matter what you'd like to believe, it's important to understand that it's possible and entirely logical to see the world in a different way to what we're taught. The heliocentric model and the theoretical physics and the science behind it are no closer to explaining the reason or meaning of our existence than anything, any New Ager or anything. Science doesn't have the answers for the how, why, and where we come from. But our hearts do, and our minds do. But our minds have been imprisoned, they've been caged, they've been partitioned, they've been stolen from us with an idea that we are stuck on a spinning ball. It's very important to understand how strong the attachment is and how it was formulated, how these plans to form opinion and general consensus and culture are plans that are laid over decades and generations. a 30-year plan, no flaws, collapse. Millions and thousands of theories about how it was done. Occam's razor. You can't fight it.